If you're a Sonic fan, then lately you've probably noticed we've been seeing more of the Blue Rat's cousin, Shadow the Hedgehog. And to me, that's genuinely great. Shadow used to be around a lot more often, but after 06, he basically stopped being consistently playable, unless it was a multiplayer mode or some sort of spin-off. You see, I have a certain soft spot for the edgy characters. Sasuke and Shadow pretty much ensured that back in the 2000s, so I figured with Sonic 3 the movie and Sonic X Shadow generations coming up this year, why not check out Shadow the Hedgehog for the Nintendo GameCube. Now, it's really impossible to talk about Shadow the Hedgehog without touching on the reputation this game has. Critics and fans both seem pretty mixed on the game, and overall the entire concept of giving the edgy squirrel a gun didn't seem to hit the mark according to most people. There's also the issue of having to do multiple playthroughs of the game just to get the canon ending, which I've never done before, so this will also let us see if it's as painful as the internet makes it out to be. Okay, so while writing this script, this is where I planned on talking about the entirety of the game. But oh, for the love of God, I could have never made a complete script about this game, even if God himself held a gun to my head. This game is the definition of a fucking mess, and frankly, it's the greatest comedy I've ever had the misfortune of experiencing. Firstly, the writing. I mean, seriously, nobody gave a shit. This game is already a meme in its concept. Seriously, there's an edgy black hedgehog with a gun that rides motorcycles, but the writing just makes it so much worse. I like the way that Shadow is characterized. However, every single part of the game's plot exists purely because none of the characters want to put any actual brain power into what they're doing. For example, Shadow ends up questioning if he's a robot in multiple of the game's paths. Well, Shadow, if you think you're an android, why don't you just give yourself a paper cut or slam yourself into a wall or something? There's easier ways to find out. Another thing that doesn't make sense is the entire conflict with Gun and its commander. The Gun commander is mad at Shadow because Maria died 50 years ago. Little does he know that a gun soldier popped a cap in her ass. Now, the reason I say this doesn't make any sense is, did it not occur to him that Maria was entirely okay until that day Gun arrived? Even if you think Shadow did it, nowhere along the lines did it occur to you that, maybe this military organization boarding the ship had something to do with it. So fuck you, Abraham. They can never make me like you. And the dialogue just never improves. Shadow just says damn now for no reason, and that's goddamn hilarious. But that's all you're getting from the dialogue. A chuckle here and there. Although the actual voice acting is actually really good in my opinion, especially Shadow's. I love Jason Griffith here. Also, the stories sometimes don't make any sense. If you go straight neutral, the story involving Black Doom and Gun just gets no closure, and it just makes everything feel really disjointed. Shadow the Hedgehog is like Sonic Heroes to me, a flawed game that I find enjoyment in. And while I do still think the game can be fun if you're only doing one playthrough here and there, the game just falls apart the moment you sit down with it because it constantly makes a joke out of your time. The gameplay is entertaining for all of 30 minutes until you finish the first playthrough, then realize you have to do like 9 other playthroughs that all revolve around you doing these stupid Hero Dark challenges, and if that wasn't bad enough, you have to do every final stage twice because there's a good and bad ending for every path. This means you gotta start in Westopolis 10 goddamn times, and while I don't hate Westopolis, by the 4th playthrough, I want to shove Sonic onto the TTC rails every time he says,
"Hey Shadow, long time no see."
I also gotta ask, why give the player so many endings if only one of them was going to be canon anyway? Like, hey, if you left the ending open and the players could decide which they liked, I'd get it. But when you have a true canon ending, it essentially makes all of these other endings a colossal waste of time, because you could have just made one cohesive narrative to fit your canon ending anyway. Instead, we just get a bunch of disjointed story beats that vaguely create a plot with some Super Shadow final story segment. And you're not going to get much of that traditional Sonic speed in this game that isn't like scripted loop-de-loops or rail grinding, because Shadow gets interrupted every few seconds because the acceleration is through the roof and he almost flies off a cliff, or because you have to stop to beat up a bunch of enemies to unlock a spring or rail grind or something. The combat blows too, because for some reason, instead of making the guns just fun to use, they just shot Shadow's natural moveset in the foot. The homing attack barely does anything to bigger foes, and every other move in Shadow's arsenal is just buns. Seriously, every enemy can just be gunned down so mindlessly as long as you got ammo, so they just become obstacles you'd rather avoid, but can't because you have to comb over every stage to reach objectives. And it's a shame too, because Shadow can actually move fast, but he doesn't control that well, so why would you bother? And for no other reason I can think of other than fuck it, motorcycles are cool, Shadow can now drive a variety of vehicles, and they're all awful. They're literally just all goddamn awful. Shadow the Hedgehog tries to take itself really seriously, however the game only becomes fun when you stop taking it seriously. There's straight up a mission where Shadow has to blow up the president before he can take off in his escape plane. Name me a single other game where a 3-foot hedgehog has to kill the goddamn president. I think this game is hilarious, and it never fails to make me smile, but I kinda can't shake this feeling that I like it for all the wrong reasons. There's a point in the game where after finishing a stage, Shadow is monologuing an existential crisis, and Vector's just busting a move in the background, and it cracks me up every time. The game plays all these scenes straight, and I'm sorry, I can't commit to taking it seriously when Shadow is the only one I can take seriously. Thanks to Jason Griffith's great performance, Shadow genuinely does come off as serious and brooding, despite the funny things like Damn Fourth Chaos Emerald and stuff. But how the hell am I supposed to take Shadow telling Eggman he's sending him to hell seriously? Sure, Shadow might be serious, but the other guy's literally named after an egg. The concept of him rotting away in hell is comedic in itself. The soundtrack is actually genuinely decent in this game though, and I can't lie, I do unironically listen to the game's main theme a lot. I think it goes hard. All in all, Shadow the Hedgehog is really hard to recommend. I mentioned earlier that this game occupied the same space as Sonic Heroes for me, in the way that I know this is flawed to high hell, but some parts of me still likes it. However, that inexplicable fondness / nostalgia doesn't exclude this game from having pretty rough controls, pretty mediocre, even bad level design, and a subpar story that just ends up wasting the player's time more often than not. There's definitely worse Sonic games in the franchise in my opinion, but you could do far better, and if you're just getting into the franchise, do yourself a favor and wait for Sonic X Shadow Generations if you're interested in Shadow. Anyway guys, join me next time where we break Yuji Naka out of prison and force him to make Sonic Adventure 3. Later!